I don't think I did anything wrong, I just laughed. It was one of those moments where someone makes a joke you're not supposed to laugh at, and before you know it, the whole room has gone quiet. The kind of laugh that feels harmless, until the person you love stops looking at you the same way. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Mirela Vance, and I still don't understand why everyone acts like one laugh can destroy a marriage. It was just a joke, a harmless one, the kind people tell at dinners to keep the mood light. A stranger said he'd trade lives with my husband any day, just to have a wife like me, and I laughed. That's all I did. I didn't touch anyone. I didn't flirt. I just laughed, maybe too loud, maybe too long. The table joined in, and for a moment I felt powerful, seen, admired. Daniel didn't say a word. He just smiled, that quiet, careful smile he uses when he's trying not to make a scene. I thought he was being dramatic. Later, I told him it was nothing, that he should be proud people found me interesting. He said charm wasn't the same as respect. I rolled my eyes and told him he was taking things too seriously, like always. But something changed after that night. His voice got softer, his movements more precise, like every sound he made was a record. I didn't realize silence could be so loud, or that laughter could echo long enough to end a marriage. The night started like any other work event, full of chatter, clinking glasses, and the faint buzz of city lights through the restaurant windows. I was dressed to impress, hair freshly done, heels clicking against the polished floor. Daniel walked beside me, quiet as always, his hand brushing mine lightly, calm and steady. I told myself he was just tired from work, that his silence didn't mean anything. The table was full, 10 of us gathered for a client dinner. I sat in the center, where I could catch attention without seeming desperate for it. Nadia, my best friend, leaned over and whispered that I should shine, make people laugh. I smiled. Attention had always felt like air to me, and tonight I wanted to breathe it fully. Eli, a friend of the client, joined us halfway through. He was charming, easy, the type who smiled as if the world owed him amusement. He made a playful comment about trading places with Daniel just to have a wife like me. I laughed, maybe a little too loudly, and added that Daniel was irreplaceable anyway. The table laughed with me, and for a moment, I felt powerful. Daniel didn't laugh. He just watched, his expression calm but steady, like he was holding back a verdict. I told myself he was dramatic, that he didn't understand humor. Later, in the car, I mentioned the joke again, hoping to ease the tension. He said only that charm wasn't the same as respect. I rolled my eyes and told him he was overreacting. He said, maybe. At home, the house felt different. His side of the bed was untouched. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee, and his mug sat inverted beside mine. He moved quietly, meticulously, arranging papers and folders in neat stacks. I asked what he was doing. Organizing, he said. I laughed, thinking it was unnecessary. He replied softly, clarity is important. Over the next few days, I noticed the patterns. Calendar alerts on his phone, spreadsheets glowing with dates and notes, folders labeled household, bank, utilities. A faint hum of the printer at night, a USB taped under a folder, all subtle, almost invisible, but deliberate. Every small detail felt like a piece of a larger plan I couldn't see. At brunch with Nadia, I boasted about the dinner clip going viral. She laughed and said people adored me, thought I was bold. I smiled, but inside a small unease grew. When I returned home, Daniel was at the table again, folders on the counter, laptop open, precise and quiet. I mentioned the rooftop video reposts, expecting a reaction, but he just nodded and returned to his work. I began to realize that his silence was different from indifference. It was a quiet control, a calm observation, a measured response I couldn't provoke. My laughter, my charm, my public confidence, all of it had lost weight in the face of his meticulous presence. And in that stillness, I felt the first hint of unease that would only grow. The following week passed in a strange rhythm. Every morning, I woke to the sound of the coffee maker, the quiet clink of Daniel's spoon against his mug, the soft click of the guest room door closing behind him. We didn't fight, not even once. That should have been a relief, but it wasn't. The silence stretched between us like a long, invisible rope. I could feel it tightening every day. At first, I tried to pretend everything was fine. I told myself we were just in one of those cold spells couples go through. I bought new candles for the living room, cooked dinner, even left little notes on the counter. Funny lines, reminders to smile. He never mentioned them. He read them, I think, because they always disappeared, but nothing changed. When I mentioned the dinner incident again, trying to laugh it off, he said nothing. Just kept typing on his laptop. I told him people at work thought it was hilarious, that they even said I should do stand-up. He said, "Maybe you should." I laughed at that too, thinking it was a joke, but he didn't look up. On Tuesday, I got tagged in another post from that night. Someone had clipped the part where I laughed at Eli's joke and added a caption about modern marriage goals. The comments were a mix of praise and mockery. One said, "She's bold. Her husband looks terrified." I showed it to Nadia over lunch. She said people online were jealous. "You made everyone uncomfortable because you broke the rule. Wives aren't supposed to shine brighter than their husbands," she said, twirling her straw. I liked the way that sounded. It made me feel like I was the brave one in the story. When I got home, Daniel was sitting at the table again. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. His laptop was open, but the screen was mostly white except for a few lines of text. I leaned closer. There were dates, small entries in neat rows. February 12th, March 9th, April 3rd. Beside them, brief notes. Client dinner, travel, payment sent. I asked if he was keeping work expenses. He said yes, just organizing things. I joked that he'd make a terrible accountant. He said, "You'd be surprised how clear things look when you keep records." I told him to stop talking like a detective. He smiled a little and said, "Maybe I am." That night, I met Nadia for drinks. We ended up at a rooftop bar downtown, the kind with dim lights and expensive cocktails. Eli was there too, which I didn't expect. He waved us over, already laughing about something. I hesitated for half a second, then told myself Daniel wouldn't care. It was just a drink. Eli asked about the video, said he couldn't believe how far it had spread. I told him it was nothing, but he grinned and said, "You looked good in it. Confident." That word again. It felt like a compliment and a challenge at once. He asked how Daniel had taken it. I told him my husband was dramatic, that he didn't understand humor. Eli laughed and said, "Maybe he's scared you'll realize you could do better." I rolled my eyes and laughed too. Someone nearby must have overheard because I saw a phone rise, a small red light flashing. I didn't think about it until later. When I came home past midnight, the house was dark, except for a faint light under the guest room door. I didn't want to knock, but the glow made me curious. I pushed the door slightly. Daniel sat at his desk, headphones on, eyes fixed on his laptop. He didn't see me. On the screen, I could make out an open spreadsheet again. Columns, dates, short phrases. My name was on one line. I stepped back quietly. In the morning, he acted normal, made coffee, packed his bag, and even asked if I needed the car. I said no. As he left, I noticed his phone screen light up on the counter, a reminder that read, "Paper drop, 4:10 p.m. I asked what it was for. He said, "Just errands." That evening, I called my mother. I told her Daniel was being distant, cold, almost mechanical. She said men always act that way when they know they're wrong, but can't admit it. "Don't give him power by apologizing," she said. "He's sulking. He'll come around once he realizes he can't win." I liked that answer. It made me feel in control again. The next day at work, my manager, Janice, stopped by my cubicle. She said she'd seen a clip going around online. Me, laughing, Eli making that joke. "You might want to keep your personal life off the internet," she said, smiling tightly. I told her it wasn't personal, it was just a dinner. She said, "Perception matters, Mirela, especially when your husband works with our firm on joint projects." That caught me off guard. I didn't realize Daniel's company still had a contract with ours. I said I'd handle it. At lunch, I texted Daniel to ask if anyone at his office had said something. He replied hours later, not to me, to HR. I didn't understand what that meant. I asked if he was in trouble. He sent back a single word: documentation. That evening, he was already home when I walked in. There were papers stacked neatly on the table again, some with colored tabs. He looked up, calm as ever, and asked if I wanted dinner. I said yes. We ate in silence. At one point, I said, "Maybe we should talk to someone, like a counselor." He said, "We'll both talk to someone soon." I thought he meant therapy. I felt relieved, but later, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard him talking quietly in the hallway. I opened the door just a little and heard his voice saying, "Yes, I have the files. I can deliver them tomorrow." I froze. When he noticed me standing there, he ended the call. I asked who it was. He said it was a client. I asked what client calls this late. He said, "One that wants closure." For the first time, I felt uneasy. There was something in his calmness that didn't fit anymore. I wanted him to yell, to show emotion, to argue, anything human. Instead, he just gathered his things and went back to the guest room. The next morning, he was gone before sunrise. I found a sticky note on the counter that said, "Meeting, personal." Next to it, his mug was rinsed and turned upside down, as always. The house felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. I called Nadia. I told her about the late-night call, the spreadsheets, the locked drawers. She said he was probably trying to make me feel guilty, that men like Daniel need to feel in control when they've lost attention. "He's bluffing," she said. "Ignore it. You did nothing wrong." I wanted to believe her. So, when another video surfaced the following day, the rooftop clip, Eli's voice saying, "Maybe he's scared you'll realize you could do better," followed by my laugh, I told myself it didn't matter. It was harmless. That night, Daniel didn't come home until late. I was on the couch pretending to read. He walked in quietly, set his keys down and said, "You're getting a lot of attention again." I said, "So you saw it?" He nodded. "Everyone did." I told him people were overreacting. He said, "You keep saying that word like it makes things smaller." I said it wasn't serious. He said, "It's serious when people stop laughing with you." I told him he sounded like a stranger. He said, "You turned me into one." I started to argue, but he just picked up his mug and walked to the sink. "You like the spotlight," he said. "Let's see how it feels when it's brighter than you expect." He left the kitchen without looking back. I sat there for a long time, staring at the calendar on the fridge. A new entry was written in his careful handwriting. Downtown 9:25. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house made me flinch. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floor. Around midnight I heard the soft whir of the printer again. I waited until it stopped, then went to look. The tray was empty, but the smell of toner hung in the air. I turned on the lamp and noticed the edge of a folder sticking out of the drawer. It was labeled in small letters, "Household." I opened it halfway before I heard his footsteps in the hall. He looked at me, calm but unreadable. "Looking for something?" he asked. I said I was just tidying. He nodded, closed the drawer gently, and locked it. "You should get some rest," he said. I wanted to scream, to shake him out of that unbearable calm, but instead I smiled. I told him he was acting paranoid, and he said softly, "You call everything paranoid when you don't want to understand it." Then he walked away, leaving me alone with the smell of paper and silence. I told myself it was fine. I had nothing to hide. At least, that's what I kept repeating, over and over, until the words stopped sounding true. The weekend arrived, and with it, the kind of party that promised laughter, music, and a little bit of chaos. I told myself it would be fun, harmless fun, and that Daniel would see it the same way. It was a rooftop gathering for a friend's birthday, glass walls catching the city lights, laughter echoing off the surrounding buildings. I wore a dress I knew would turn heads, not because I wanted to flaunt anything, but because I liked the way people noticed me, subtle or not. Daniel stayed silent in the corner, a drink in hand, arms crossed, the shadow of his usual calm on his face. Eli was there too, smiling that same easy, knowing smile, the one that made my heart skip without warning. I avoided him at first, because Daniel was beside me, but I couldn't help glancing his way when the music swelled and someone shouted for people to dance. My friends nudged me, whispered encouragements, reminding me to be seen. I laughed and said yes, stepping onto the small dance floor, spinning lightly to the rhythm of the music. People cheered, someone raised a camera phone, and I caught the reflection of my own face in the lens, the wide smile, the confidence. I didn't notice Daniel watching at first. He stood near the bar, quietly, letting the energy swirl around him while he remained fixed in place. I told myself it was normal, that men don't always get the thrill of being noticed in the same way. I focused on the music, on Eli spinning a playful story about a mutual friend, on Nadia laughing beside me, her hand brushing mine briefly. Then it happened. Eli, with a playful bow, spun me slightly in his direction and said, "Be careful. Don't let your husband feel replaced in front of everyone." I laughed loudly, the kind of laugh that draws attention, and the crowd echoed it back. Someone took a video. A few people clapped. I could feel the eyes on me, some curious, some approving. It was intoxicating. Daniel didn't move. He didn't raise an eyebrow. He just stood there, expression unreadable, arms folded. I told myself he was enjoying the spectacle, that he liked watching me shine. I tried to catch his gaze, to see the reaction I wanted, anger, jealousy, any emotion. But all I saw was stillness. Afterward, I joined my friends near the edge of the rooftop, sipping a cocktail and laughing at nothing in particular. Eli leaned closer and whispered, "You know, I really think people would follow your lead if you decided to take over the world." I laughed, brushing it off as playful. It wasn't until I got home that I realized the weight of the evening. Daniel was already there, sitting at the table with his laptop open. 2 mugs sat on the counter, his pristine and upside down, mine half finished from earlier in the evening. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I told him the party had been fun, that everyone had loved the dancing. He nodded, then asked, "Did you notice anyone recording tonight?" I shrugged. "Probably. People are always recording. It's normal." "Normal," he repeated softly without looking up. "Does it feel normal to you when the laughter isn't just in the room?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He tapped a key on the laptop and the screen brightened. Rows of dates, names, and short notes were displayed, each line precise. There was a new entry. Rooftop party, video posted. I laughed nervously. "It's just a video, Daniel. It's harmless." He closed the laptop slowly and said, "It's only harmless until the wrong people see it." I told him I was exaggerating, that no one could take it seriously. He didn't respond. Instead, he left the kitchen quietly and returned an hour later with 2 folders, one labeled Archive A, the other Archive B. He placed them neatly on the counter. "What's this?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Documentation," he said. "Everything from the dinner, the office, the rooftop." I laughed. "You mean receipts? Notes? You're being ridiculous." He shook his head slowly. "I call it clarity. You call it ridiculous. We'll see which one lasts." I wanted to argue, to tell him that I was the one being confident, the one in control. I told him people at the party had said I was radiant, bold, unbothered. He said, "Bold without reflection can look like carelessness." I walked to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. "You're being dramatic," I said. He didn't answer, just went back to the guest room. I heard the faint hum of the printer shortly after. I assumed it was nothing. I didn't realize he was printing blank pages to test the toner, to ensure the machine was ready when needed. The next day at work, the clip of me spinning on the dance floor had circulated. People tagged me, commented, and shared. One coworker asked if Daniel was upset. I laughed, said, "He's fine. People are always overreacting." I didn't realize Daniel had already contacted HR through his firm's liaison. They hadn't said anything to me directly, only confirmed internally that they'd received documentation. That evening, Daniel was at the table again. His laptop lay open with the folders placed precisely on either side. He asked, "Did anyone notice you laughing?" I shrugged. Everyone noticed. They liked it. It was harmless. He picked up one of the folders and flipped it open. Inside were printed screenshots, dates, notes, even some photographs from the evening. "Harmless for now," he said. "Not harmless if repeated." I laughed again, trying to make light of it. "So you're logging everything?" "I'm recording. There's a difference," he said quietly. The calm, methodical way he spoke made me want to shout, to shake him, to see a flicker of emotion that proved he cared. But there was nothing, just deliberate movements, organized notes, and that steady voice that somehow weighed more than any shouting ever could. I tried distracting myself. I worked late the next day, edited campaign materials, replied to emails, all the while checking my phone for comments, likes, reposts. My online life felt alive, but at home, the energy had shifted. Daniel no longer sat at the table idle. He worked, made notes, filed documents. His presence felt heavy without being visible. I decided to confront him that night, to tease, to provoke, to see some reaction. "You're taking all this too seriously," I said as I poured wine into our glasses. "I call it preparation," he said simply. "Preparation for what?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "For the consequences of people thinking they know us better than we know ourselves." I laughed. "We're fine, you're fine. You just think everything I do is a reflection of you." He finally looked at me, his eyes steady and calm. "No, I think it's a reflection of respect, and it's missing." I wanted to argue, to convince him that it was absurd, that the world thought I was radiant, that I was confident. I wanted him to see it the way I did. Instead, I felt a shiver of uncertainty. He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold. He just turned off the lights and left the room, leaving me alone with the faint hum of the fridge and the smell of paper from the folders on the counter. I tried to laugh it off to myself, telling myself that he was being sensitive, dramatic even. I even sent Nadia a text, complaining about how quiet he had become, how he didn't react. She replied almost instantly, telling me that men like him always act this way when they feel like they're losing control. I smiled at the idea, felt a small rush of vindication. But when I checked my phone later, there was a new calendar entry from Daniel. Follow-up, 9:25 a.m. I didn't know what to make of it. I told myself it was a meeting for work, that I was overthinking. Still, the precision of it, the way it was written in his neat handwriting, made my chest tighten. That night, as I lay in bed scrolling through social media, I saw the rooftop clip again, Eli's voice echoing with the playful comment about replacing Daniel. I wanted to feel exhilarated, to see it as evidence of my own charm, but the edge of dread crept in. I thought about Daniel, sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through those folders, methodical, quiet, and calm. I thought about the hum of the printer, the faint smell of toner, the precise times noted in his calendar, and for the first time, I realized that silence could carry more weight than any argument, and preparation could be more powerful than shouting. I wanted to call it a phase, a temporary chill in the house. I wanted to tell myself that in the morning he would wake up and everything would be as it had always been, that I could laugh freely again without consequences. But deep down, I knew something had changed. The calm, deliberate way he had handled the dinner, the rooftop party, even my online presence, had shifted the balance. I had expected outrage, jealousy, a fight. I had expected him to yell, to show some sign that he cared. Instead, he had built a quiet, controlled response I couldn't see in its entirety. And that made me feel uneasy, exposed, in a way I hadn't anticipated. I spent hours staring at my laptop that night, looking at the reposts, reading comments, screenshotting praise, trying to convince myself that I was the one in control. But the folders on his table, the calendar entries, the faint hum of the printer at night, they whispered a different story, one I wasn't ready to understand. The next morning, Daniel's side of the bed was empty. His mug sat upside down beside mine. The calendar on the fridge now had a second entry. Follow-up, noon. I told myself he had errands, that it was nothing. But every precise line, every silent movement, every careful note he made, began to build a quiet tension I couldn't shake. And as I prepared for work, brushing my hair in the mirror, checking my lipstick, I realized I was no longer performing for the world. I was performing for him, and he wasn't applauding. By the fourth week, the energy in the house had shifted almost completely. Daniel moved into the guest room permanently, leaving his side of the bed untouched and smooth, while I still slept in what used to feel like shared territory. I told myself it didn't matter. I convinced myself it was a phase, that he was sulking, that he would come back when he realized how harmless my actions had been. But the quiet was deliberate now, almost surgical, and it had a weight that made me shrink into my own space. I tried to keep busy. Brunch with Nadia became a ritual. We laughed over the rooftop video, and my social media reposts, dissected the comments, and marveled at how viral a single moment could go. "People adore you," she said, swirling her drink. "They love how bold you are." I nodded, feeling a rush of justification. It was easy to believe I was untouchable when the outside world cheered me on. At home, everything was catalogued. I noticed new folders on the shelves. Utilities, bank, household. Their edges lined up perfectly. When I glanced into the guest room, a spreadsheet glowed faintly on his laptop, columns neatly labeled, dates, events, notes. I asked what it was. He said, "Information matters." I told him he was being obsessive. He said, "Clarity is not obsession." I tried provoking him again, testing boundaries. At dinner, I mentioned how funny people had found my rooftop dance, expecting a laugh, some acknowledgement. Daniel sat quietly, listening, and said nothing. I asked if he was being dramatic. He simply replied, "Some reactions deserve careful attention." I began noticing small signs of his preparation everywhere. A USB taped beneath the taxes folder, a printer quietly humming at odd hours, his phone lighting up with precise calendar entries, meeting, personal, follow-up, 4:15 p.m. I tried to ignore it, focusing on work, friends, social events. But even then, the house felt different. The air held a quiet tension, a reminder that I was being observed, noted, measured. The children sensed it too. Tomas and Ray stopped asking about their father's side of the bed, stopped checking if he was coming to tuck them in. I overheard them whispering in the hall, worried about whether Daddy was angry. I brushed it off, telling them he was just busy, but I could feel the strain of my own choices rippling outward. One afternoon, I was picking up Ray from school. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, calm as ever, handing her homework back, speaking briefly with her teacher. I said hello. He nodded, eyes steady, as if nothing had happened. I asked him why he hadn't been home to see the kids that morning. He said he had work. I asked what kind of work keeps you away from your own children. He said, necessary work. I laughed nervously, but he didn't. Back at home, I tried to reclaim control. I rearranged the living room, bought flowers, even lit candles during dinner to make the house feel warmer. Daniel didn't comment. He left the candles untouched, mugs rinsed and inverted, folders still neatly stacked. I tried to tease him in front of the kids, asking if he had taken his organization hobby too far. He just smiled faintly, as if humor was optional. By evening, I realized he was keeping a detailed account of everything I did. Notes, receipts, timestamps, even photographs of social media posts. I found a faint stack of papers by the printer, blank except for small annotations in the corners. I asked him about it. He said, "Tests. Organization matters." I told him it was ridiculous. He said, "Nothing here is ridiculous if it matters later." I began to feel a strange sense of vulnerability. My public persona, the confident, bold, untouchable Mirela, wasn't enough in the house anymore. Daniel didn't scold, didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he watched and recorded. Quiet, deliberate, lawful. I realized the shift wasn't in anger, it was in control. The next morning, I discovered a new entry on the fridge calendar. Follow-up, 9:15 a.m. I asked what it was for. He said nothing, only that I would know soon enough. I wanted to ask more, but he left for work, calm and precise, the kind of calm that felt heavier than any argument could have been. That evening, I tried to provoke him at dinner, telling him people at the rooftop party had joked about him being replaceable. I expected a spark of anger, a retort. Instead, he just set down his utensils carefully, said nothing, and poured himself water. I asked why he didn't respond. He said, "Some truths don't need a reaction." I felt a pang of frustration. Every provocation I used to rely on, jokes, laughter, attention, was neutralized by his calm precision. I realized the power I thought I had over him had shifted. My friends cheered me on online. My social posts drew likes and comments, but none of it mattered in the quiet of our house. Daniel's reaction was controlled, lawful, and unwavering. Over the next few days, I tried different tactics. I flirted subtly with colleagues, laughed louder at jokes that should have seemed minor, posted more on social media, and even teased Daniel when he didn't respond. He didn't give me the reaction I wanted. Instead, he kept notes, recorded timestamps, and prepared. Every interaction, public or private, was catalogued. I began to see the meticulousness everywhere. The neat stacks of mail, the locked drawer in the kitchen labeled household, the USB hidden beneath the taxes folder, the spreadsheets glowing faintly on his laptop. Each detail felt deliberate, a careful collection of information. I told myself I was in control, that I was untouchable, but inside, I began to feel uneasy. One night, I overheard him on a call. His voice was quiet, careful. "Yes, everything is organized. The files are ready. Delivery confirmed." I froze. Delivery? What delivery? I wanted to interrupt, but he ended the call before I could step forward. I realized then that his silence was a weapon I didn't understand. His calm, his organization, his methodical notes, they weren't passive. They were preparation, and I was running out of ways to provoke him, ways to assert the control I had always believed belonged to me. By the end of the week, the house felt heavier. The children sensed it too, asking fewer questions, speaking more quietly. I tried to maintain appearances, told them everything was fine, but the tension was palpable. I told Nadia about it again, trying to laugh it off. She said, "You're playing checkers, Mirela. He's playing chess." I laughed at first, but the metaphor sank in. Every move I made, every joke, every post, every laugh was observed, recorded, and catalogued, and Daniel didn't need to react. That realization hit harder than any argument ever could. I understood then that this wasn't about anger, jealousy, or humiliation. It was about control, and he had it, quiet, lawful, and complete. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, replaying every joke, every laugh, every moment I thought was harmless. Each one felt heavier now, like a chain slowly tightening around me. I had expected resistance, confrontation, maybe even a fight. Instead, Daniel had built a silent, unstoppable structure around my actions. And I could see it now, clear as day, even if I didn't yet understand its full scope. By the time I went to bed, his side of the bed was empty, his mug rinsed and inverted beside mine, and a faint hum of the printer lingered in the guest room. I knew the next week would be different. I didn't yet know how, but I could feel the shift in the house, in the air, in the quiet weight of his preparation. I wanted to dismiss it, to tell myself I was untouchable. I wanted to laugh, to charm, to provoke. But for the first time, I realized that nothing I did could break the calm precision of Daniel Vance. By the 5th week, the air in the house had become almost unbearable in its stillness. Daniel had established a rhythm I could no longer ignore. He moved through the rooms with quiet precision, making coffee at the exact same time, aligning mugs and utensils, carefully placing folders and papers in neat stacks. The guest room had become his command center, a silent fortress of order, spreadsheets glowing faintly on the laptop, calendars meticulously marked with dates and entries, like follow-up, 9:25 a.m. or meeting, personal. I tried to maintain control where I could. I spent more time online, posting stories, sharing clips, laughing at the rooftop video that had circulated again. I tagged friends, replied to comments, even sent messages to co-workers who had teased me about being the woman from the dinner clip. I told myself I was untouchable, that the world still adored my confidence. But Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. The careful, methodical way he observed and recorded made my online presence feel insignificant, almost meaningless. At work, I felt the ripple of his calm strategy. HR had discreetly requested a meeting, citing internal concerns. I smiled, thinking I could charm my way through it. But when I entered the office, the manager's tone was neutral, almost clinical. She asked if I was aware of any ongoing issues related to the dinner clip or the rooftop video. I assured her I was not, that everything was harmless. She nodded slowly, took notes, and didn't argue. The silence in that office, the careful documentation of every word, echoed what I had been experiencing at home. When I came home that evening, Daniel was already there. 2 mugs sat on the counter, his pristine, mine half-finished, just as always. A faint hum came from the printer, then stopped. I asked what he had been printing. He said, "Nothing for you to worry about." I laughed nervously, pretending it was absurd. He didn't respond. Instead, he went to the guest room and returned with 2 folders, Archive A and Archive B. He set them on the counter with deliberate care. I asked what they were. He said simply, "Documentation, everything in one place." I laughed again, trying to dismiss it. "You mean receipts, notes? It's ridiculous." He shook his head. "Not ridiculous, organized, useful." I could feel the shift in power. My attempts to provoke, to charm, to assert control, had all been neutralized by his calm precision. I tried one last method of reclaiming attention. I told him about a flirtatious message from a colleague, laughing as I read it aloud. I expected him to react. Anger, frustration, concern, but he didn't. He just nodded slightly, noted it in his own mind, and moved on. The children were quieter than ever. Tomas and Ray no longer asked where Daddy slept, no longer sought approval or comfort. I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, preparing dinner, asking about their day, but the tension was tangible. I realized that my actions, the laughter, the jokes, the attention I craved, were now being measured, catalogued, and prepared against me. One afternoon, I found a USB taped beneath a folder labeled taxes. I asked him about it. He said it was for backup. I laughed, told him he was paranoid. He replied quietly, Careful preparation is not paranoia. The word stung, though I refused to admit it. That night, I tried another strategy. I wore a dress I knew he liked, hoped for a spark of attention, a flicker of desire. I smiled, leaned closer while we ate, told him stories of compliments I had received that day. He listened, nodding faintly, taking notes in his own mental ledger. I asked if he was annoyed by all the attention. He said softly, "Not annoyed, observant." It was maddening. Every attempt I made to reclaim control, every laugh, every gesture, every post, was accounted for. My sense of power, the one I had built through humor and charm, was irrelevant in the face of his meticulous calm. I tried to provoke him with subtle jabs, mentioning comments from friends or online followers. He would respond with a small, measured sentence, never more than a whisper, and return to his spreadsheets or folders. I began to notice the patterns everywhere. Calendar alerts, spreadsheets open with dates and times, faint hums of the printer, folders labeled and stacked precisely, locks clicking softly on drawers I used to have access to. Each small detail, unnoticed at first, now felt like evidence, proof that he had planned this response carefully. Even our conversations had changed. When I tried to tease, to provoke, he would answer with precision. "Not everything is a joke," he would say softly. When I laughed off a minor accusation, he would reply, "Perception matters." I tried to argue, to twist words, to claim humor as my defense. He never raised his voice, never lost control. His calm was a weapon more effective than any shouting, any tearful plea, any dramatic display. One evening, I overheard a quiet phone call in the hallway. He spoke softly, deliberately. "Yes, everything is accounted for. Delivery confirmed." I froze. Delivery? What delivery? But he ended the call before I could approach. The precision, the careful wording, the organization. It terrified me more than anger ever could. At night, I lay in bed listening to the hum of the printer in the guest room, imagining the folders he had prepared, the files, the notes, the timestamps. I realized that my world of laughter, charm, and public approval had lost its meaning in the quiet of our home. Daniel had turned my every move into data, every joke into documentation, every social post into a record. I tried to remind myself that I was still in control in public. I posted more online, tagged friends, shared videos, laughed at the rooftop clip again. But the sense of freedom I had relied on felt hollow. At home, Daniel's silence, his methodical attention, and the precise patterns of his preparation had shifted the balance entirely. By the end of the week, I realized I had been living in a bubble of denial. The attention I once craved, the laughter that had empowered me, no longer mattered. I couldn't provoke him into anger, couldn't charm him into forgiveness, couldn't make him care the way I wanted. Every attempt was catalogued, measured, and prepared against me. That evening, as I watched him pour himself water, carefully placing the mug upside down on the counter, I felt the full weight of it. He had built a structure I couldn't break, a calm, lawful, unassailable presence that nullified my influence. I wanted to laugh, to tease, to act bold, but I realized that my words, my jokes, my laughter were now part of a record, a ledger I could not escape. I knew then that the next phase was coming. Daniel had promised quietly that he would handle it properly. I laughed at the thought, imagining a conversation, an argument, some dramatic confrontation. But deep down, a cold certainty settled in my chest. I was no longer the one in control. Every move, every joke, every post, every glance I had thought harmless had been accounted for, and he had only just begun to act. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the printer, the rhythm of the house, and the soft ticking of the clock. For the first time, I understood that calm precision could be more devastating than anger, and that lawful preparation could dismantle everything I had built with laughter and charm. The house was quiet, the folders were stacked, The spreadsheets glowed, and the next move was his. The morning sunlight hit the courthouse plaza, and I thought it would be like any other day. Daniel's attorney approached, calm and precise, handing me an envelope with a crisp official stamp. I opened it to find a civil defamation and separation notice detailing temporary financial and communication orders. My hands trembled as the reality sank in. Daniel turned, thanked the clerk politely, and walked away, leaving me frozen in the crowd.